Hello everyone, my name is Bea Cupin and you are watching Rappler. Today, October 23, has been quite a heavy day, especially for all of us who keep close attention to defense and security and diplomacy discussions in the Philippines. Because yesterday, the Philippines reported, or the Philippines said, that a China Coast Guard ship rather, hit a armed force of the Philippines hired supply ship during a regular resupply mission to Ayungin Shoal to the BRP Sierra Madre, that's the Philippines outpost in Ayungin Shoal. Also, on the same day, a few hours after the incident involving the Unaiza May, a Chinese maritime militia ship hit or the nautical term I'm told is an elision incident happened between the BRP Cabra, that's a Philippine Coast Guard ship, and a Chinese Maritime Militia vessel. What you're seeing now, these are footage from the Armed Forces of the Philippines. It shows the moment that the Unaiza May, again, that's an indigenous boat. It's the hull is made out of wood that they use to bring supplies, much needed supplies, to the BRP Sierra Madre. That's a World War II era battleship that the Philippines purposely ran aground in Ayungin Shoal back in 1999. Now, this video that you're seeing now is the moment that the BRP Cabra, it's the shorter boat to the lower side of your screen, uh, was hit or collided with, depends on how you see it, this Chinese Maritime Militia boat. So when I say Chinese Maritime Militia, hindi siya part ng Coast Guard ng China, hindi rin siya part ng Navy ng China, pero experts have pointed out that the Chinese authorities or the Chinese Coast Guard typically use these ships as reinforcement whenever they conduct so-called law enforcement operations out in the West Philippine Sea. Now, as a result of that incident, there were two press conferences held today with top officials from the DFA, the DND, the National Security Council, the Philippine Coast Guard, and the AFP. The first press conference was with the National Task Force for the West Philippine Sea, and the second one was held in Malacanang with Secretary of National Defense Gibo Chudoro. Before we go further into the discussion of today, let's hear what Secretary Chudoro said earlier today.
A special command conference this morning of the National Security and Defense Cluster in order to brief and to give his guidance on the latest violation by China of the sovereignty of the Republic of the Philippines. The Philippine government views the latest aggression by China as a blatant violation of international law. China has no legal right or authority to conduct law enforcement operations in territorial waters and in our exclusive economic zone. We are taking this incident seriously at the highest level of government. The use by China of brute force behind these ingenuous facades necessitates this course of action. We called for this press conference to give you a clear and factual narrative of what transpired. The Chinese government is deliberately obfuscating the truth. The Philippine Navy and the Philippine Coast Guard are here to give you an undistorted narration of the illegal acts of the Chinese vessels.
Strong words from Secretary Chudoro there, accusing China of obfuscating the truth. He also called it the distortion of the truth on the side of China. We asked him during that same press conference if he was referring solely to the Chinese Coast Guard or the China Coast Guard statements, or was he referring to a bigger disinformation network perhaps. He didn't say that it was the latter, but he did say that the Philippines has noticed a pattern of China allegedly distorting the truth with regard to incidents in the West Philippine Sea. We'll talk about that a little more later. So what happened ba in the first place sa Ayungin Shoal or malapit sa Ayungin Shoal during this regular resupply mission to the BRP Sierra Madre? Now, we are relying on timelines provided for by both China and the Philippines. So at 6:04 Sunday, October 22, the Philippines says the first collision occurred. So that's the video that you saw earlier of a Chinese Coast Guard vessel hitting a small, what looks like a smaller wooden boat. That's the Unaiza May 2. That happened around 6 past 6 in the morning. Um, a few minutes before that, the Onaiza May was separated from the BRP Cabra, that is the PCG vessel or the Philippine Coast Guard vessel, tasked to accompany, to escort the Onaiza May. So if you are unfamiliar and if you're only tuning in now, actually, itong regular resupply missions, they happen every at least once a month, sometimes twice a month. It depends the exact date. Clearly, the Philippines has not announced beforehand, but specifically for Ayungin Shoal, they deploy two indigenous boats. These are AFP-contracted boats called the Unaiza May 1 and the Unaiza May 2. So sila yung nagdadala ng equipment, ng mga pagkain, provisions for a small team of soldiers stationed at the BRP Sierra Madre. Now, accompanying them are typically or conventionally two Philippine Coast Guard vessels. In this case, it was the BRP Cabra and the Sindangan. Now, bakit si Unaiza May or yung dalawang Unaiza May ang ginagamit sa Ayungin Shoal? Well, for context, it's also a move by the AFP to prevent or reduce possible tensions in the area. Kasi sa ibang lugar kung saan may outpost ng Pilipinas sa West Philippine Sea, ang gamit natin ay Philippine Navy ships. So it's only in Ayungin Shoal where the Philippines specifically chooses not to use gray ships. Instead, again, they use these smaller vessels, ships, para magdala ng supplies, and they are just escorted by the PCG for these missions. So again, according to the Philippines, at past 6, and this is also supported by video, the AFP does not say who specifically or which entity it comes from, but overhead video showing the different ships in the West Philippine Sea. So around 6:04 a.m. on October 22, the first collision occurred again between the Unaiza May 2 and a Chinese Coast Guard vessel. Minutes before that, kumbaga naharang or na cordon off ng both Chinese Maritime Militia at ng Chinese Coast Guard si BRP Cabra, yung supposed escort ship ng Unaiza May. So, interestingly, at around 6:11 a.m., the China Coast Guard issued a statement. This is a rare statement for China na while a resupply or Aurore mission is ongoing to the BRP Sierra Madre, nag-issue na ng statement yung Chinese Coast Guard saying that it blocked vessels of the Philippines. Blocked pa lang yung gamit nilang term. Later on, according to to the timeline by the Chinese Coast Guard, they say that at 6:14 a.m., China says the Unaiza May 2 sailed across the bow of the China Coast Guard ship, thereby causing the collision. Kasi what China is saying is that the Philippines is to blame for the incidents. Now, 2 hours later, at this point, according to the Philippine Coast Guard, talagang totally nahiwalay na si Unaiza May 2 at si BRP Cabra. And at this point, natamaan na or nag-collision na si Unaiza May at yung Chinese Coast Guard ship. 2 hours later, at around 8:04 a.m., yung BRP Cabra naman ay natamaan ng isang Chinese Maritime Militia ship. The PCG also, or the AFP rather, also released video of this incident. Later on, the PCG also showed video showing na parang nagkabanggaan nga kasi sobrang dikit nung dalawang barko. At yung context din nito kasi nga, hours before this, at around 6, right? The two, not just two, but several Chinese ships, both China Coast Guard and Chinese Maritime Militia ships, were basically trying to separate, or they successfully separated the BRP Cabra from the Unaiza May. Ang sabi naman ng China, the collision between the Cabra and the Chinese Maritime Militia ship happened at around 6:14 a.m. So may mga 10-minute difference. Now, at 10:39 a.m., that was the first time that the Philippines, through the Department of National Defense, announced their first statement regarding the collision incidents in the West Philippine Sea. I say incidents because it turns out, according to reporting, at least from our colleagues who were on the BRP Cabra during the resupply mission, the BRP Cabra was hit at least 2 times during yung nagkadikita na nga sila ng Chinese Maritime Militia ship. At 11:47 a.m., the Chinese Coast Guard released its second statement, accusing again the Philippines of being the instigator. This time, sinabi nila na nagkabanggaan na nga, at sabi ng China Coast Guard, the move was to make faults with China and escalate the further tensions between the two sides. By 2:10 p.m. rather on Sunday, the China Coast Guard then finally released its full statement on the incident. So anong mga na-announce or anong developments na nangyari during the two earlier press conferences here in Manila? Well, one thing, Philippines has filed a protest against China over the incident, and two, the Philippine Coast Guard has been tasked to probe yung damage incurred by the Philippine ships during the collision. So let's talk about the protest. According to DFA spokesperson Ambassador Teresita Daza, the DFA summoned China ambassador to the Philippines, Wang Shilian, but allegedly or reportedly, Wang was not in Manila this morning, Monday morning. So ang pinatawag na lang ay yung Deputy Chief of Mission ng China, yung humarap sa kanya or yung nagpatawag sa kanya ay si Assistant Secretary Eileen Mendoza Rao. In response, the Chinese embassy in Manila later released a statement saying that during the meeting, they call it a meeting, China conveyed strong dissatisfaction and firm opposition to what they call the Philippines' intrusion to Ayungin, well, we call it Ayungin Shoal. They have a different name for it. Now, yung context, ano ibig sabihin ng summon? Ano tong summon na to? Summon is a protest. During the summon, mag-uusap yung dalawang sides, but it is the Philippines, it's a rather strong way to show that the Philippines opposes yung nangyari. In the words of NSC Assistant Director General Jonathan Malaya, it is the Philippines saying that we do not accept what is happening. Now, after the protest, or aside from the protest, the President Ferdinand Marcos, as mentioned by Secretary Chodoro earlier in the press conference, gathered or had a command conference with had a sectoral meet. Sorry, the defense cluster. He gathered the defense cluster of the Philippines. When you say defense cluster, you're referring to the DND, the Department of National Defense, of course, the military, the armed forces of the Philippines, but also present during the meeting earlier were the Navy, the National Security Council, and the Philippine Coast Guard, among other agencies. So ano yung nangyari from that meeting? Nag-usap sila at syempre yung mga ibang pinag-usapan hindi na disclose to the public or to the media kasi yung iba doon potentially operational matters which obviously our defense officials and the military will not disclose. But for the PCG, they have been ordered to hold a probe into the incident, but specifically to conduct an investigation on the damage caused on both the BRP Cabra and the Unay-Zamay 2. Now, sabi ni PCG Commandant, they have 5 days to finish this investigation. Si BRP Cabra already is on land much earlier than the Unay-Zamay 1 and the Unay-Zamay 2 and the BRP Sindangan. Yun medyo mas mabagal yung travel back nila to shore because the Unay-Zamay is, since they're smaller boats, less powerful boats, they only have wooden hulls, mas mabagal sila lumakbay compared to the Philippine Coast Guard ships. They also have yet to assess kung ano yung extent talaga ng damage. Just to clarify, at the time of the press conferences earlier, hindi pa dumadating on land yung si Unay-Zamay 1 at si Unay-Zamay 2. Now, what happened during the resupply mission, officials say it was a partial success in that the Unay-Zamay 1 was able to reach the BRP Sierra Madre Again, the BRP Sierra Madre is the Philippine outpost in Ayungin Shoal. Pero si Unaiza May 2, eventually they decided for her, the boat, to not push through with going to Ayungin Shoal dahil even after the collision, sinusundan pa rin siya ng Chinese Maritime Militia according to the PCG at ng China Coast Guard. So at that point, they deemed it unsafe and they ordered na the Unaiza May to return. And there's a very striking image. If you can check, there's a thread that I started on X, Twitter. You can also check Rappler's social media accounts for it. There's an image of the BRP Cabra and the Unaiza May 2 when they were eventually reunited. Kumbaga, naka-standby lang sila sa gitna ng dagat. Tas yung si Sandingan, makikita mo sa gilid. At that point, I believe the Unaiza May 1 already made it to BRP Sierra Madre. And they were surrounded by so many China ships, by both ships of the China Coast Guard and also its Chinese Maritime Militia ships. Now, ano ba yung context? Again, if you're only tuning in now, I'm talking about how the Philippines so far has responded to the October 22 incident wherein, according to Manila, according to the Philippines, because of dangerous maneuvers by China ships, by the China Coast Guard and Chinese Maritime Militia, those dangerous maneuvers led to collisions with two Philippine ships, the BRP Cabra and the Unaiza May 2. So if you've been closely monitoring news about the West Philippine Sea and Ayungin Shoal, you'll know that Ayungin tensions in Ayungin are quite high. More or less the past few months, every time a resupply mission happens, there's always a case of harassment, of attempts by the Chinese ships rather to block the Philippine ships. Now, ito yung first collision that has happened between a China government ship and a Philippine government ship or a Philippine government sanctioned ship, referring to the Unaiza May 2. Ito yung first ever. Obviously, officials hope that it will not happen again. But there have been, kumbaga, very dangerous instances in the past. For instance, just in August, the China Coast Guard used water cannons against both the resupply ships and the Philippine Coast Guard ships. And then in February, much earlier, the China Coast Guard used a military-grade laser against a Philippine Coast Guard ship, thereby putting its crew in danger kasi mabubulag sila kung baga nung laser na yun. Both these incidents, so yung three incidents, the February case wherein a military-grade laser was used, and then you have the water cannoning incident in August 2023, and then now October 2023, you have the collision. All three of these instances, the Philippines summoned Ambassador Wang Silian of China. In February, it was President Marcos himself who summoned the ambassador of China. We do not know the full breadth of that conversation, but President Marcos did say na in so many words, he told the ambassador, this is not what friends do. Friends do not point lasers at each other. The second incident, it was an undersecretary or a deputy minister of the DFA who summoned Ambassador Wang Shilian. And again, the third one, just this morning, yung sinaman ay si Ambassador Wang, pero purportedly wala siya sa Manila. So, Deputy Chief of Mission ng China, yung sinaman ng isang Assistant Secretary, specifically ASEC Eileen Mendoza Rao of the DFA. So two things again, major developments or at least major announcements from the Philippine side today. First, the protest. Philippines lodged a protest. Again, this was done through summoning the Deputy Chief of Mission of China to the Philippines. And second was the probe, or is the probe, that the PCG is expected to finish within 5 days. Now, what's next? Yung tinatanong ng mga media then during the press conferences, right? Like, beyond the diplomatic protest, beyond strong statements of condemnation, and beyond thanking our allies and other like-minded countries, because several countries have come out and condemned China's actions on October 22. What else can we do? Now, if you ask the departments that, the DFA will tell you that their role is to communicate diplomatically, through diplomatic channels with China. The DND will tell you they cannot disclose operational matters, but they have issued statements, and they have said, as Secretary Chidoro mentioned, parang kumbaga the highest levels of government takes this very seriously. And that question, frankly, is something that we ask as well. Like, after this, what will the Philippines do? You have to remember that just 10 months ago, President Marcos was in Beijing with President Xi Jinping, promising a new era in ties between Beijing and Manila. They promised a maturing of ties between the two countries. So, what the question is now, is this the maturing that the two countries were envisioning? Obviously not. But what will Manila be doing next in the coming days, in the coming weeks? And well, they have said that this will not deter, like the collisions that happened on Sunday, October 22, will not be deterring the AFP from future resupply missions to the BRP Sierra Madre from its assertions in the West Philippine Sea. Also, to add, take note that the Ayungin Shoal is within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. So the Philippines' position is also that, in the first place, China has no right to exercise law enforcement operations in that area. Okay, so again, a summary of what we discussed, or what has happened today. On October 22, Chinese and Philippine vessels collided in the West Philippine Sea. At least two instances of these collisions. First was between the Unaizame 2, that is an AFP-contracted ship, and a much, much larger China Coast Guard ship. The second was between the BRP Cabra, that's a PCG or Philippine Coast Guard ship, and a Chinese Maritime Militia ship. So it's state-owned, but it is supposedly part of a fleet for fishing, but has been known to be used by the Philippine or the Chinese Coast Guard for its operations and law enforcement operations, so-called law enforcement operations in the West Philippine Sea. The Philippine response so far has been to summon initially Ambassador Wang Shilian of China, but since he's not there, the deputy chief of mission was summoned instead. Second, the PCG is expected within 5 days to come out with the results of its probe on the extent of damage on the BRP Cabra and Unaizame. We do not know yet if they will publicize those results, and we will stay tuned to see what happens next. Thank you for watching. This has been Bea Cupin. Keep it on Rappler for more updates on the October 22 collision, how the Philippines will further respond if it does, but also for general updates on the West Philippine Sea and how the Philippines is navigating this very, very complicated relationship with China. Thank you for watching.